Hello and welcome to Popular Antiquarian, the podcast about a middle-aged man exploring the strange and forgotten corners of pop culture. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're looking at another mockbuster from the Asylum, the production company often seen as the worst movie studio in the world. This time out, it's a film selected by my patrons over on patreon.com/HJDoom. Age of Tomorrow, the 2014 attempt to ride on the coattails of Edge of Tomorrow, a high-concept action science fiction film starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt that was criminally overlooked when it came out. I'm not going to spend a long time on Edge of Tomorrow since the Asylum mockbuster has almost nothing in common with its inspiration, save for an alien invasion. But I'd be remiss if I didn't at least give it a mention. I think this film is ace. A genre-bending mashup of Starship Troopers and Groundhog Day in which Tom Cruise plays a cowardly public relations officer who accidentally gets himself sent to the front line of a war with aliens, and then something weird happens to him that makes him live the same doomed attack on the alien lines over and over again. He teams up with a much more badass soldier who lived through something similar, and they try to come up with a way of defeating the alien menace once and for all. It's great, not least because it's not just mashing up genres, it's mashing up tones as well. There's some tremendous death on the beaches war action, some grimly humorous slapstick, and a pleasantly platonic relationship between Cruise and Blunt. Tom Cruise might be a weird cult-obsessed goblin of a man off camera, but he's always had real superstar quality in front of it, and he delivers a great performance in Edge of Tomorrow, as does Emily Blunt. The only real downside for me is that the aliens look a bit rubbish. They're those big masses of flailing tentacles that seem to be so popular nowadays, and I think that might be something to do with them being quite easy to animate with CGI. Basically, if you take one thing away from this review of Age of Tomorrow, it's that Edge of Tomorrow itself was a much better film than its performance at the box office would indicate. I mean, it did well enough. It made back its budget, but it didn't exactly set the box office alight despite strong reviews, and I can only assume that's because we as a species have internalised the idea that we aren't allowed to have nice things, a deep-seated psychological self-harm impulse that explains both Donald Trump and the existence of Mrs. Brown's Boys. The Asylum plans their films a long way in advance in order to make sure they can be released at exactly the right time to benefit from the publicity around the film they're ripping off. This sometimes means they don't have a great deal to go on when the script is being written. This is why their mockbuster of Avatar was an adaptation of a Edgar Rice Burroughs novel. It's pretty clear in the case of Age of Tomorrow that they knew there was an alien invasion involved, but not a great deal more. They probably could have read the novel that Edge of Tomorrow is based on, which is called All You Need Is Kill by Hiroshi Sakurazaka, but who has time to read actual books in this day and age? Books are just comics for losers, and comics are just movies for losers, and honestly movies are just TikToks that have got out of hand. Age of Tomorrow is not a good film. It's not even a good Asylum film. It's one of those Asylum movies where the gulf between the script and what the crew are prepared to even attempt is a vast chasm. There is almost no part of the action of this film that anyone involved is able or willing to represent on screen. At times this is as funny as you might expect, but more often it's simply infuriating. There's quite a few bits of set dressing that I think turn up in later Asylum science fiction films as well. All of the urban externals are shot in the same nebulous bit of downtown LA they seem to use for literally any city. There's an alien planet being represented by approximately 12 square feet of a botanical garden, and the only notable actor in the production spends 90% of his time sat down behind a desk. If you're a fan of the Spot the Asylum cliches, then you're in for something of a treat. What's frustrating with this is that there's a couple of really fun ideas in here that could, in more skilled hands, have turned into something really engaging. To understand the sense of despair that this film creates, we actually have to start at the end with the final image of the film. A man is trapped on an alien world. He has travelled across time and space to find his daughter, and now, just when he thought they'd been reunited for good and everything was going to be okay, his whole world has come crumbling down. She's been shot in the stomach. She's fading fast, and his only hope is to get back to the portal that brought him to this world. As he stumbles through the alien landscape carrying his dying daughter, he realises that they are surrounded. An alien reaches out and shows him a hologram image which demonstrates that the portal back to his home is gone. Wearily, he puts his daughter down. She tells him it's over, they should just give up. But he can't accept that. He's fought so hard and it was all for nothing. He takes a grip on his fire axe, turns, and with all of his remaining strength, launches himself at the aliens in a final gesture of impotent rage and despair. We fade to black. The end. I think this is an objectively decent way for a film to end. It's a gut punch that undercuts the usual heroic narrative where the good guy always makes it out at the last possible second, and teenage girls definitely don't bleed out from a stomach wound far from home and comfort. It's a massive downer, but it's one that feels cathartic. Or at least it would in literally any other film. Here, the sudden outpouring of cleansing emotion that comes from a melodramatic climax is more relief than anything else. Specifically relief that the movie is over and you can go away and do literally anything else with your life. This is an excellent ending to a completely different film to the one they actually made. Actually, this is only one of the endings to the film. There are in fact two emotional climaxes, both involving characters dying, and neither of them works. What they've actually done here is make two movies when they really should have made one. They're united by a shared alien invasion theme, but ultimately they barely cross over at all, except right at the end. The more interesting of the two movies is the one about a giant asteroid that's headed towards Earth. It's massive, about quarter of the size of the moon, and if it should crash into the planet, it's goodbye to all life on the surface at the very least. Noted character actor Robert Picardo, who you may remember from Star Trek Voyager, where he played the emergency medical hologram, is assembling a crack team to take on a daring mission to save the world by flying out to the asteroid and blowing it up before it hits the Earth. You may remember this as the plot of the film Armageddon. That's because it absolutely is. Robert Picardo needs the absolute best for this mission, which is why he's sent for a disgraced former soldier whom we might as well call Captain Loose Cannon. He's a maverick. He doesn't play by the rules, and he quit the army after his last team got killed. He sounds like the perfect man to lead a mission to reenact Armageddon. He comes complete with a team of highly disposable grunts who are experts in their field, and also there's a physicist called Dr. Gordon acting as his NASA liaison. All of this is wordlessly derivative, but things get a bit more interesting when Captain Loose Cannon's team land on the asteroid. Firstly, they discover signs of habitation. Secondly, their spacesuit costumes are really badly made, and the faceplates fog up almost immediately so you can't see who anyone is, and that is hilarious. Thirdly, a bunch of alien craft suddenly emerge from the asteroid and begin an invasion of Earth. That doesn't happen in Armageddon, and I quite like faking that they're going to lazily rip off Armageddon and then swerving into ripping off every alien invasion narrative ever instead. It's like ordering a very disappointing looking cheese and ham sandwich and discovering when you bite into it that it's actually a very disappointing cheese and pickle sandwich. The alien invasion of Earth brings us to our second key narrative, in which we are introduced to a man in early middle age who is a firefighter, and he has his teenage daughter for the weekend because he's divorced. If there's one thing that Hollywood in all its forms overestimates, it's how relatable divorced dads actually are. This is not intended as shade to any actually divorced dads out there listening. I'm on a second marriage myself, but I don't think the fact that I screwed up a serious relationship should automatically qualify me as hero material. Similarly, I don't think being estranged from your children should be quite such a common starting position for an action hero. It may have worked for Mary Poppins, but I don't think it should always work for The Rock. Nevertheless, this divorced dad who doesn't see enough of his child is exactly who we're getting as our other main protagonist. When the alien invasion happens, he becomes absolutely determined to save his teenage daughter, who is inexplicably trapped in an office building downtown. In fact, it's not inexplicable. They've got access to an office building and it will be portraying at least 3 different locations across the runtime of this movie. These, then, are the 2 pillars of the movie: Captain Loose Cannon and the amazing divorced dad. Captain Loose Cannon and his team will end up going to the aliens' home planet via portal. Amazing divorced dad will go on a trek across downtown LA before also going to the aliens' home planet via portal. His daughter will mostly hide under a desk before being zapped to the aliens' home planet via portal. We should probably say a few words about the alien invasion. These are mechanical drones rather than little green men. They look like flying metal beach balls that can open up like flowers when they make use of their weapons. They are incredibly basic CGI, and they have all the natural menace of a dog toy. They have weapons that can either make someone's head explode off, or transport people to a different planet via portal. They seem to do either more or less at random, and if you think the reasons for transporting some people and murdering others will be explained, then I can only assume that this is your first episode of the podcast. Modern VFX teams love flying aliens that have simple geometric shapes. They are absolutely the easiest thing to animate, and not touching the ground makes it straightforward to insert them into almost any shot. It's also much harder to judge whether something is correctly sized when it's flying. It could just be further away than it was in the previous shot. It's one of those things where once you realise just how much easier flying stuff is to do, particularly with CGI, you start seeing it everywhere in cheap science fiction, and indeed quite a lot of expensive science fiction. While the amazing divorced dad battles his way across downtown with some of his firefighter friends, Captain Loose Cannon and his team of disposable soldiers have come up with a plan of their own, where they will go through one of the portals created by the alien weapons to the home planet and there do something useful. It's not clear precisely what they're intending to do, but they seem to think it'll be a good idea. They do it, and thankfully the planet, which as previously stated looks a lot like a botanical garden with some weird colour correction, has breathable air, which means they can take off their helmets, which means that we can see who is actually talking at any given time. There's also a digital map painting of an alien base. Captain Loose Cannon and his team break into the alien base, or at least I assume they do, in classic Asylum style. In one scene they're outside, and then in the next scene they're inside the base. The Asylum teleporter alive and well in this movie. The base looks like a Doom level designed on an off day. Barely have they got inside than an alien attacks them. This is a humanoid alien, and the costume would look pretty good if this were an episode of Star Trek from the 1960s, and would look just about passable if this were an early episode of Next Generation. It will become obvious over the course of the film that they have precisely one alien costume, since we will never see more than one alien at once. The fight with the alien goes badly, or at least I think it goes badly. They actually just fade to black halfway through the fight, and then the rest of the plot goes forward on the assumption that it went badly, and that everyone has been captured. Or maybe some people have been captured and some people haven't, because the remainder of this plotline is Captain Loose Cannon trying and failing to rescue people before heading out to signal to Earth to let them know how to defeat the aliens. The cunning plan to defeat the aliens turns out to be blowing up the asteroid, aka the actual original plan all along. So if Captain Loose Cannon had just stuck to his orders instead of gallivanting around an alien planet, a whole bunch of nonsense could have been avoided. There are some wild moments on this ride. Firstly, Captain Loose Cannon is absolutely terrible at keeping his team alive. They all die, mostly of head explosions, but sometimes of being zapped or stabbed by aliens. His entire team, including the NASA liaison, fail to make it, and it's like someone decided to speedrun the Dirty Dozen in 20 minutes. There's even a baffling scene where he rescues a human taken from Earth, and she responds by repeatedly demanding that he stab her. It's supposed to be tragic, I guess, but when he does, it reads as a hulking man murdering a woman with PTSD, which doesn't make him any more of an appealing protagonist. Man who stabs trauma victim to death is somehow even less relatable than extremely divorced dad, even if he does do his very best sad face while he's gutting her. It doesn't help that this alien base is functionally one room and one corridor, so Captain Loose Cannon leaves the room, goes into the corridor, does a bit of business there, then goes back into the room to do a bit of business there, and so on. Sometimes I think it's pretending to be a different room, but it is just the same room. It's not even a very big room, which makes the climactic fight with an alien look like a punch-up in a telephone box. He does briefly find a different room, which is entirely rendered in CGI and has an alien queen in it straight out of Aliens. And I do mean straight out of Aliens, laying eggs and everything. It's like if someone asked a 5-year-old to draw an alien queen from memory, based on a description they'd heard in the playground. Captain Loose Cannon makes some kind of psychic contact with the alien and later tells the people on Earth that he knows what her plan is. He never explains what the plan is, just that he knows what it is. It's yet another bit of the movie that feels like they just didn't get round to writing it. Captain Loose Cannon also meets a tragic but underwhelming end shortly after successfully delivering his message to the Earth. If the Captain Loose Cannon portion of the film feels like I keep passing out and missing key scenes, then the portion of the film with the amazing divorced dad is possibly even worse. Now, this plot does at least make narrative sense. There's a burly blue-collar worker caught in the middle of an alien invasion looking for his daughter. In plotting terms, it works much better, but here the problem is the extraordinary lack of any ability to stage the action the script calls for. In a film that is struggling to do a fist fight on a small soundstage, divorced dad fighting several alien drones with a fire axe out in the streets of LA is just a massive ask. And they end up somehow filming these various fights without him and the alien drone ever being in the same shot together, which is kind of impressive, honestly. It just really shows how this film cannot possibly deliver on even the modest ambitions of the script. And my favourite example of this comes from early on, when they're establishing that divorced dad may be a terrible life partner and primary caregiver to children, but he's very good at being a firefighter. And they do this by showing him being awesome at a fire in an office building that looks uncannily similar to the office building that his daughter is hiding in, and also a third office building that divorced dad and several of his firefighter chums will hide in on their way to the second office building, if you follow me. Being an Asylum veteran, I immediately sat up in my seat when I saw they were doing a big fire plot. The presence of the fire was indicated by crudely pasting some CGI fire onto the windows of a building that was clearly absolutely fine, and I immediately thought to myself, oh wow, they're going to try and do a fire rescue scene without using any fire. Listener, I was bang on the money. They did indeed try to do dramatic scenes of a man rescuing people from a fire without using any actual fire. Instead, we get some smoke and some dim yellow light as people run about inside an office, and sometimes ceiling tiles fall on them. It's up there with Titanic 2 for obviously rubbish attempts to stage a disaster without doing any damage to the office space they've rented for the afternoon. This was honestly the high point of the film for me. I love seeing the Asylum trying to stage things like this because it's always exactly as terrible as you'd expect, but they keep trying nonetheless. It finishes with our highly divorced hero jumping out of a window onto the bonnet of a car, and absolutely does not show anyone jumping out of a window. Instead, we get someone very carefully landing on a car because, much like The Office, they don't want to damage it in case they have to pay some kind of additional fee. Divorced Dad's odyssey across the city also involves a car crash without an actual car crash and the death of all of his chums from the fire service. 2 of them die at once, and he very specifically only mourns the white guy, which seems all kinds of problematic. Once he gets to the office where his daughter is hiding, he fails to prevent her from being portaled to the alien planet and follows her towards their joint demise, leaving Robert Picardo to leave a flotilla of god-awful looking spaceships to attack the asteroid and save humanity. Where did this flotilla of spaceships come from? Why does destroying the asteroid save humanity when the Earth is infested with drones that can teleport humans to the other side of the galaxy? Why are the aliens teleporting people in the first place? Why are the aliens all immune to firearms, but incredibly vulnerable to fire axes like some kind of demented new breed of Pokemon? Why, after the team of soldiers was captured, did we jump cut straight to Captain Loose Cannon, who had lost his spacesuit but seems otherwise completely unharmed? Literally none of these questions will be answered over the course of Age of Tomorrow. If I have to try and pinpoint the reasons why Age of Tomorrow is so bad, I think the biggest is the confused mess that is the script. Trying to effectively get through 2 films in the space of 85 minutes is simply impossible. It creates the need for too many action scenes, and that minuscule budget cannot even begin to handle the most basic of these. The best Asylum scripts tend to be the ones that grasp what is possible at this level of cheapness, and write based on the idea that it's mostly going to be people arguing in rooms punctuated by very low-key bursts of violence and a minimal amount of CGI. There's also just too many people in this film, despite it only having 2 actual characters. The idea of doing Armageddon and then hard pivoting into War of the Worlds is actually a decent one, but that needed to be the focus rather than also having this tedious divorced dad plotline on Earth. It doesn't help that the dialogue here is absolutely execrable. Captain Loose Cannon and Divorced Dad are only capable of spouting manly cliches, and everyone else is struggling to deliver lines that sound like they are written by an AI composed entirely out of malfunctioning fax machines. The direction really isn't helping either. James Klondalik seems to have little interest in finding ways to elevate the material and instead opts for whatever feels like the least trouble to stage. There's no attempt here to come up with any camera work beyond what keeps everyone in frame for the duration of the shot. The action is lacklustre in the extreme, even by the Asylum's bargain basement standards, and contrasts especially unfavourably with last episode's Abraham Lincoln vs Zombies, which had a real sense of what could be achieved within the limits set by the budget. The acting is universally bad, and I'm inclined to blame that at least partly on the script and the direction as much on the actors themselves. Even Robert Picardo, generally great, and the obligatory well-known character actor can't manage to do anything with the material, so the rest of the cast are understandably struggling. I mean, Picardo gives it his all. He has to deliver a sub-Independence Day monologue about this being humanity's last stand, and he's really, really going for it, but it still doesn't land because the words he's being forced to say are so terrible. Kelly Hu as the NASA liaison, she's fairly good but barely in it, and the 2 leading men, Anthony Marks and Lane Townsend, oscillate between bland and downright punchable. Pretty much no one else gets enough space to even begin fashioning a performance, but I will give Taylor Colley, who plays the daughter, props for effort, and Nick Stellate, who plays a military type, seems to have found a reading for the role I can only summarise as perpetually sad egg. I mean, there may be worse films in the Asylum back catalogue than this, but I'm not sure whether one of their films has succeeded in making me angrier than this one. Maybe the one that was riffing on the Universal monsters, that was just really, really bad. I think it's because both the military loose cannon and the divorced dad are tropes that Hollywood has run into the ground, and they both irritate me on a fundamental level, unless they're very well or humorously badly handled. This is neither. I also find it frustrating that bits of the film seem like they're just missing, either that the editing was exceptionally bad, or the scriptwriter just hadn't finished the script when the filming started, and so they just went with what there was. It does have its moments. The body count is pretty high for an Asylum film, and the half-assed way that pretty much every death is shot lends them a certain pathetic silliness. People just die apropos of almost nothing, often from sources that are visually uncertain, and it makes the world feel randomly fatal in a way that I found quite endearing. Every death lands with the suddenness of a manhole gag. I do think the alien costume looked quite nice, but that's more than balanced out by just how lazy the alien drones are. Some of the worst designs for alien drones I've seen, and that is saying a lot. The whole film is just going, that'll do, when that will manifestly not do, like a surgeon looking around for approval after sticking a plaster onto a sucking gunshot wound. I didn't find it a chore to watch exactly, I will say that much. The overstuffed plot means that there are things in theory always happening, even if they manage to shoot it in a way that it's not clear that the thing has actually happened, and it's just confusing enough to require a degree of attention from the viewer, which does help keep me engaged. And again, 85 minutes of actual footage, that's not a big ask. I made it to the end without difficulty. They should put that on the poster. HJ Doom made it to the end without difficulty. I think that's everything that needs to be said about Age of Tomorrow, except to note that the Asylum would later give it the even more generic title of Alien Extinction, which highlights that it has startlingly little value as any kind of comment on Age of Tomorrow. Most damning of all is just how inessential it is, even as an exemplar of the Asylum's way of working. Aside from the attempt to do a major fire without any fire, there's not even anything that's interestingly incompetent, and that's the worst thing I think I can say. It's boringly incompetent. And there's nothing worse than boring incompetence. That is all for this episode. If you're having a nice time and want to help me carry on subjecting myself to terrible media, then you can support me over on patreon.com/HJDoom. Any and all support is gratefully received, as this is literally my only source of personal income, aside from occasionally pet sitting for my siblings. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky. Next time out, we're going to be looking at what the Asylum made of Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. It's got Lance Henriksen in it, so surely it'll be absolutely fine. Until then, thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.